Well, welcome once again to the New Testament portion of our one-year Bible study. I'm glad you can be with us today. We're here at the Chautauqua Institution in New York. It's a beautiful day here, a perfect temperature. And let's get right into our New Testament study for today. I hope you're keeping up with the one-year Bible. It's a rewarding journey from January 1st all the way to the end of December of the same year. You can read the Bible in 1 year by following a simple plan. It's really a great thing to do. And I hope you're keeping up with the readings. Now today we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. I just want to read one verse, chapter 1, verse 17. This is the Apostle Paul speaking. He says, "For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with words of human wisdom, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power." So the Apostle Paul is saying that Christ did not send him to baptize, but to preach the gospel. Now this is an example of when you're reading along in the Bible, it seems like there might be two contradictory statements being made in the Bible, and you have to research and investigate and dig a little bit deeper to get to the bottom of the controversy. If you recall in Matthew 28, at the end of Matthew 28, we have what is called the Great Commission. The Great Commission says to go all out into the world and make disciples of all the nations, and it says to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So you have the Great Commission of Christianity, which is to make disciples and to baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. But here, in this passage in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, the Apostle Paul says, "For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel." So is there a contradiction between what Paul is saying here in 1 Corinthians and what Jesus gave the apostles in Matthew 28, where it says, "Go out, preach the gospel, make disciples, and baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit"? Well, there is no contradiction because, of course, the Bible is sent from God. There is one God, and He has one message for mankind. He doesn't give us contradictory things to do. He doesn't tell us to do this, but then tells us to do that in direct contradiction of it. The Apostle Paul is not directly contradicting the words of Jesus Christ. And the reason he's not, and this is important in Bible study, you have to assume that divine inspiration has inspired the prophets and the apostles to give us true revelation. And so you have to assume that we're not dealing with a real direct contradiction. We're dealing with a different perspective. For example, in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, the Apostle Paul is trying to say to the Corinthians that he did not come to them as a baptizer, but as a preacher of the gospel. Now that doesn't mean that the Christian church doesn't have the responsibility to baptize. That's what Matthew 28 is a great commission to the whole church. It's not just a great commission to the church leaders or to all the pastors or to all the Christians or to all the senior pastors or the ministers. It isn't a direct command that every pastor, every church leader, every Christian has to baptize people. It's a general commission for the church. It is saying that Christians and the Christian church needs to be involved in preaching the gospel, preaching the Bible, making disciples, and baptizing converts and discipling those converts. So that's the agenda for the Christian church. That's the agenda for all of us corporately when we gather together, when we organize as a church. It isn't the specific calling of each and every individual Christian to baptize. If that were the case, then most Christians would be disobedient because they haven't baptized someone in water. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever baptized another person into Christianity? Probably not, unless you're a pastor. If you're a pastor, that is one of your functions at a church, is to baptize the new converts. But if you're a regular Christian or if you're even a called and ordained minister, it may not be your specific call to baptize people, but it is the church's call in general to baptize converts. And so that's what Matthew 28 is talking about. It's talking about the general command of Christ for the church to baptize converts, make disciples of Jesus Christ throughout all the world. But it's not saying that every individual Christian has to baptize. It's not saying every leader has to baptize. Only those who are appointed to do so by the church usually baptize. So again, we see an example of something that seemingly is a contradiction. It might seem as a contradiction on the surface, but when we dig deeper into the Bible, we find that it's not really a contradiction. The Apostle Paul's point was that what was happening in the Corinthian church was that there were people going around saying and bragging that they had been baptized by a famous Christian leader. They were saying, it would be, for example, today it would be like a Christian saying, well, I was baptized by Billy Graham, or I was baptized by the Pope, or I was baptized by some famous Christian leader, and they were using that as a status symbol. And what Paul was trying to say is, he didn't baptize but only a few people when he came to Corinth, and anyway, he was not called by God to primarily baptize, and so he was trying to diminish his status as a baptizer so that people would not come to him for a status symbol and say, baptize me, Paul, so I can go around telling everyone that I was baptized by the apostle. And so he was not trying to belittle baptism. He was just saying that his function in the church, his calling from God, was not primarily to baptize people. But the general church commission, the Great Commission in Matthew 28, is to go and baptize the disciples and converts and make converts all throughout the world. So again, we see how the Bible has harmony. The Bible fits together. It's one divine revelation from Genesis to Revelations. It's one divine revelation from God. It does not contain contradictions. It does not contain errors. It does not contain false matters of facts. It's from the very mind of God to us today, and we can trust it because when we look at all of the apparent and so-called contradictions in the Bible, we find that they're not really contradictions. They're just different perspectives, different prophets speaking in different contexts from a different angle, and when you look at it and sort it all out, it has a harmony. It fits together. It works perfect. And so whenever you come upon a contradiction apparently in the Bible, think of this as an example. Think of how God has given us a unified revelation, and think of how it all fits together, and don't worry, you are not going to find something that out and out contradicts itself in the Bible. It's just not there, because God does not contradict himself. Well, I hope you've gotten something out of this lesson today. We're here at the beautiful Chautauqua Institution in New York, and don't go away. We'll be right back for the final segment of our one-year Bible program.